Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the FTD Virtual Design Show titled Techniques of Design, Adding Creative Flair, featuring FTD Education Consultant and Jordan AIFD. We are excited to welcome Ann live today from her home in Maine as she demonstrates several design techniques to add that wow factor in all of your designs. As a quick housekeeping note, Ann will be taking questions during the session. If you have a question for her, simply type it in the chat box in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. All right, let's get started. Welcome, Ann.
Hey, well, thank you for coming to my home and joining me in Maine. I've done some presentations virtually for FTD from my little house in North Carolina and also from Florida where I spend the winter and even from hotel rooms. But this is the very first time from my home in Maine. So here I am. And I'm thrilled to be with you. I love that these are quick little programs for us, and there's so much to be learned in this format, I think. And so thanks for joining us. I wish we were live, and it is coming back, right? But this is what we have for now, and I'm thrilled to be here with FTD and with you. And so, yeah, so techniques. Janet called me and said, there's a lot of techniques that really emphasize design in so many different ways. And what if we did a program just on techniques? I could probably do a second one because I tried to fit them all into this program and I missed a few, and I actually missed some of my favorites, and maybe I'll touch on that. But there's things that govern design. And so we know the elements of design. So that would be form, line, color, space, and texture. But everything has that. This role of bullion has those things. Doesn't make it art though, does it? What makes it artful is once we talk about the principles of design that we apply that to, and that's balance and emphasis. We're going to talk about harmony and proportion and balance. All those things then are applied to design, and that's what starts to make it artistic. But to take it one step further, we have techniques. It's how we do those things to our design, not to be confused with mechanics. Now, mechanics are the things like how to put the foam in properly, how to glue properly, how to wire properly. Those are mechanics. Techniques tend to be more of something that's going to be a decorative element. So if you see here on my mantle, I have these vintage bottles, and what I have is each one has just one thing from my garden, one type of product from my garden. This is called zoning. And so with this technique, what I want to show you is we'll take this box from FTD and we're going to zone, but in glass. So we'll just take these things. I'm going to pop them all right into, this Cosmos wants to go this way, I think. So there's all my little bottles. Anybody that sees me design knows that I love anything vintage. So there they are. They're all zoned. They all have their own place to be. And all the vintage jars are in this wonderful little box from FTD. Now to go one step further with that, we can take some of this wonderful bind wire from Smithers Oasis, and it's the really chunky one. I think it's called the rustic bind wire. And what I'm going to do now is just band around and frame around this vase so it doesn't look so, you can see it if I step away probably. And then, so that's a little bit of a wrap treatment. And then I'm going to just add some branches. I can tuck them in front of the little vials, little bottles, vintage bottles. And so this then has a little bit of a veil to it, doesn't it? Shelters it a little bit, veils it a little bit, makes it look now. Now, if you told me this was vegative, maybe it's vegative, but I think it's more of a garden style accent piece. And there you go. So this is zoning. You can't go wrong because each individual type of material is in one vase. And so we'll pop that right up here on my mantle. Zoning, veiling, and wrapping. All right, so then the next thing I want to show you, and I'm going to do this with plants, is terracing. So terracing is one of the basing techniques. So terracing is where you take your materials and you can actually make stair steps, and you can pop up from this succulent to this succulent to this shell to this succulent to this succulent, and then further down. The other thing about this, I want to show you, the statement I'm making here is all about spiral. And so if you look at how that succulent grows, it's the perfect spiral. And same thing with my seashell. Same thing with my seashell, perfect spiral. And then this was just another beach find, which I just thought it was dangerous to have on the beach. It's a metal piece, but then I kind of liked it. So I spiraled that and popped it right down on top, adding some driftwood. So here, the placements are all in a spiral. The plant material itself is all in a spiral, and it's all terraced. So this is what's called a tufted workpiece. So if we make a little collection and seeing things through glass, this lovely FTD vase, this is the large one. And then we can make a little vignette of all this tufted material. This fits perfectly, this container from Smithers Oasis. Things through glass, make it more important. A little terrarium with this great little container from Syndicate Sales, adding a little bit of driftwood. This is a great piece of driftwood that I found. If you look at it, it looks like kind of like a skull. There you go. So a little vignette put together, and I have to always add in a few sales techniques, because when you do this sort of look, people will buy more into the collection. So tufted work pieces, some of them through glass and some of them arranged. So not only is it a tufted work piece, it's also done with plants. Plants are so important right now. And the reason why I love to emphasize the plants and still using succulents is because it's the younger generation that's really digging it. And so we really need to foster that. Okay. So the next one that I want to show you is a hand tie arrangement. And I wanted to also show you collaring. Collaring is another great technique. So this is magnolia leaf. And I layered, another technique is layering. I layered a synthetic fall leaf onto it, and then another magnolia leaf, and then another synthetic skeletal leaf like that. So my plan was to hand wire and tape a whole bunch of these to collar around it. And I said, that's going to take too much time, and I want to be more efficient than that. So what I did instead is I just made a collar out of the ribbon roll, the edge of the ribbon roll, cut the hole a little bit longer, added my binding mechanic, and I chose, very specifically, I chose chenille. And the reason why is because with a lot of the soft flowers, it won't pull into them instead of raw wire, anything that's going to be edgy. So instead of this and making all kinds of them, glue is always faster for me. So there's the very same thing. You can see I started with the beautiful magnolia, that nice, wonderful texture, a little bit of synthetic greens. And then here I use the other side of the magnolia with the stem end and then the skeletal leaves. And that all is done with the wonderful Oasis glue. And it's solid as can be. And so another technique is hand tie. Now hand tie can be what we learn a lot the first time we're designing is lacing, where we're just going to put all kinds of materials into a vase and it makes this crisscross grid, and then we arrange in that. I know at boot camp, Pete Samick will always show us how to use leather leaf, and he'll put it in north, south, east, west, and then northeast and southeast and so forth around until you have this nice, sturdy, laced leather leaf. The other one we might do is parallel hand tie. And that maybe is with calla lilies, where everything is straight. It's not spiraled, it's not laced, it's straight. And then we might band that. But the one that I like the best, because to me it's very, very elegant, is the spiral. And so with the spiral, what you want to do is have a couple of stems that are straight. Notice I've cleaned these pretty good, so there's no foliage or thorns or anything messy from here down. And then you have a couple of straight stems, and then by spiraling, I'm just going to go this way and watch this movement because it's the same all the way through, this movement all the way around. You might twist it here and there. I have some of this brain celosia. I'm going to hold it a little bit lower. I find when I teach this, people choke up on it quite a ways. So I'm going to hold it down here because the look I want is a little bit looser. I tend to also grab chunks of things at a time. See these wonderful little buttercups. They're ranunculus. They're derived from a buttercup. I like groupings, and grouping is another technique. And so I'm not one to really like the style of things evenly distributed through a design. I really want to have these wonderful groupings of things. Plus, it's fast. So if you're grabbing handfuls of things like this, the roses, and then this color combination is really more into the fall tones, mixing a little bit of blue in there. That's why jeans are blue. It's because blue goes with everything, right? Twisting it as I go, twisting it as I go. And the other reason why I like this type of design is because I haven't cut anything yet. And so if I were doing this in a vase and I made a mistake, then I've already cut something maybe too short. This is wonderful mint that I grew this year. I have a handful of that. So if I did this all one at a time, it might take too long. And I think money, and I don't know if you agree with me, but people hear me at shows, I say this all the time, that I think money is either made or lost on the design bench. So anytime we can learn to be faster at something, it's always going to be a good thing. So see, I'm letting it be just kind of free. I love these ranunculus, but because they are kind of wild, I'm going to let them do exactly what they want to do, and that's be kind of wild. The mint just went that way. See, handfuls of things coming around, twisting as I go, twisting as I go. Have some lavender in there, and I'm going to finish this up with a little bit more of the Iridium. Love the colors. Love, love, love these colors. And so now to protect it a little bit, I'll put a little bit of eucalyptus around the edge. It's a harder stem, so it's going to have to fit in with those soft ranunculus stems, kind of protect them a little bit. Handfuls of things. Always going around in that perfect little spiral. I am so happy that eucalyptus is back in style. I started with that back in the 80s. So glad that it's back. Now I can quickly look at this and see if there's a falling line. If there's anything I want to adjust a little bit. That's lavender. It smells so good. And then just simply create a crescent by choosing this type of material that's going to just fall down just like that. And I can make this now into a cascade. I think I just said crescent, but that's not what I meant to say. So now I'm happy with it. And here's the chenille. So I'm going to bind this off with chenille. And the reason why is because it won't pull into, I can still get it pretty snug in there, but it won't pull into those soft stems of that ranunculus. Now I'm going to go down because I've got to feed this through my collar. So I'm going to put another one here so that I can easily weave this right down through that collar. I happen to have this gold. It's just what I happen to have. And so it doesn't have to be that. It is just exactly what I had. If you use zip ties or Oasis tape, that's fine too. But with your soft stuff, such as tulips, calla lilies, and these sweet little ranunculus, I find that this works really well. All right, so now I can just put this down through my collar. It's all gonna fit in nicely. And it's really just a sweet little edge. And you can see how wonderful the finish is on that with that lovely thing. And then here she is. What do you think? Yummy colors. Yummy, 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 everything. Yep, and I love that collar. So I would, and I'm not going to take the time to do it because it does take a bit of time to then band this, clean this all up. And then of course, band it with a matching ribbon. And I chose this lovely olive green color. So that's hand-tied spiral. I've also used collaring and layering and groupings and clustering. All of those are techniques in design. Hope you like that one. All right. Now, when we have a play and a variation in our work, and we always take our clues from nature. So here's a leaf from my garden. It's what is this stuff? Coleus, and you can see how the pink then bleeds into burgundy, and then it keeps bleeding into green. And a red across on the color wheel is green, and the green is darker down here, and it blends into the red. So nature tells us what to do sometimes, doesn't it? Then also flowers do it too. So these variations in these lovely cosmos, bringing the dark into the center and then coming out to the light. And we do that in design, don't we? We bring the dark colors into the center and pop out with the light. Even this geranium leaf is doing this, telling me the same story. This is also telling me it probably needs to be fed because it's red and then pulls up to the green right across on the color wheel. So when nature tells us what to do, let's do it. All right. The next one I want to show you is Pave. Now, Pave is everything on the same level. I remember making a lot of paved balls, and we would maybe take carnations or roses or sometimes little button mums, and they would all be on that ball in an orb form, just covered with flowers, very uniform and very tight. So this is Pave. It's the lovely little FTD box. This one's in white, and they're straight down. Then layered, another technique. Pave is a technique. And then so is layered. So when I put the seeded eucalyptus in, I was thinking of almost like scales on a fish, where I didn't want it to be wild. I wanted it just to lay flat. So then the next thing I wanted to do with this was to veil it in some way so that it would look a little bit more like the type of design I was going for. And you can veil with something as light and fluffy as Plumosa. This one has a nice little arc to it. I could veil this way. I love more natural materials. So here's some angel vine. I could veil this with the angel vine. But what I chose in the end is this bullion wire. And I'm just going to place that on there. I have another one, but he escaped me. I wonder where it went. Anyway, so what I do is I take off about 3 yards of the bullion wire, and I just bunch it all up, crinkle it and crush it. And I like this because it reflects so beautifully. So there is Pave with layering and veiling. So there's 3 techniques in this design as well. But this one, I'm going to make a companion piece to go with it. So here, because we have such little time, and I don't like to take up too much of your time, so I know it's the end of the day, I had this one this started. And so this is some driftwood that I found on the beach. And here, what I have started is some basing techniques. And so here for basing techniques, I started with the moss, because the moss is already in a pillowing shape. So here's pillowing. And then here with the magnolia leaves, this was just a few that were still left on my bench. And anybody who ever works with me knows that I don't like waste. And so when do I use things? I use them right away. And so if you know this technique of just stacking these like this, it's a perfect place to do that. So already we have pillowing, we have groupings, and I already have my frame started with the kangaroo paw. And so you can see still that I'm clustering. So I have the driftwood clustered, and then this was just 2 pieces of the little erigium, and I put that in there too, because once again, I never put things just where I'm going to use it up later, because I just don't waste. I think we can all learn basing techniques instead. So let's get going with that. So basing techniques, one of them is the pillowing, which I'm showing you here, and I chose to use the green moss. So pillowing, you want to think of the cloud, the big puffy clouds. I think the big puffy ones are called cumulus clouds, but they're the big giant puffy ones. And then this does it just naturally, doesn't it? So some of our techniques we're really taking from nature, which I can agree with that. All right, so then my knife is in my pocket, I think. So here I'm going to cluster in front of it with these roses. I have a nice well of water in here. And I'm going to take these orange roses, which I love so much, and I'm going to cluster, almost stair stepping, but it's really just a nice tight cluster of these roses. And again, when we have the short stems, this is a great technique to know and to learn. And sometimes when you're clustering, it should look like you don't know if there's one or several in that area, in that zone of that design. And so I want one to start to come up. I'm keeping them all just tight as can be. So there's clustering, another technique. Then this container is from Smithers Oasis, and it's part of their Eco Essentials. They're biodegradable and they're also compostable. And Smithers is working really hard to come up with some things for us to use in our designs that are earth friendly, and I applaud them for that. I think Smithers Oasis is a fabulous company, and I just love what they're doing and offering for us. I'm still staying in groupings. This is really formal linear. When I'm done with it, you might say, well, that really looks kind of negative to me, but that's natural for me. That's just the way I design. I design the way I see things in nature. And so for me, it's really easy to design what I see. It takes the brain work out of it, right? So this is the hanging amaranthus, and I love this stuff. I'm going to grow it next year because I saw some in a garden and I used to grow it and kind of forgot about growing it. And so I'm new to this house in Maine and learning what the soil will do and what it won't. So I like a falling line. I think that looks just yummy, just like that. And then Hypericum is another great one to cluster tight. And so here I'm going to put some down here, telling my color story. Very important. Nice and tight, feeding it right in. Let it come up a little bit. I don't want it on the same plane though, so I'm going to tuck it down just a little bit further. How are we doing? Oh, I love it already. And then I have some more of the Iridium. This denim blue, I just can't get enough of it. There's one that's really a mini one that I love to use too. And so here, tucked in, following that same line where I started with just those few that were left on my bench, I'm going to continue with Iridium, placing them nice and tight into the moss. Oh, come back out there. So my pillowing and through to this side. I also have one of my favorite flowers. It just lasts so well, and that's Lysianthus. And I'm going to turn this way to see what I might do with this. One more rose. Yes, I do. One more rose. Don't want to hide my pillowing though. Yeah, that's what I want. I love Lysianthus. I think it lasts really well, and it's going to help me finish my color story here. Oh, look at those. I don't want to go that way. Well, then let's let them. Sometimes when we're designing and we're learning design, we learn to put all our stem placements arcing outside of the arrangement. So we learn to put everything in a center binding point and let it gracefully arc that way. But with this particular design style, it is vegetative. It does have an essence of formal linear because it is asymmetrical. And so if you said either one of those, I think you could be correct. And but when I'm doing this one, I want everything to come in instead of go outside. So instead of placing everything so it's gracefully falling out, I want everything to peek right back in. And what that does is it creates a line where the eye just comes in, goes back down, the eye comes in and goes right back down. And then I love the strong line of my driftwood in that. So here's my companion piece to this. So this would sit right beside my pavage piece. So when I have something that's really kind of strict like this one, I like to do something like that right beside it. So there's again a nice companion piece to that. I also had a beautiful piece of birch, and my thought was I could put this beautiful piece of birch. It's just a wonderful piece. I just found it on the side of my yard this morning, and I'm going to pop that right down in the back. And I don't know how much you can see of that, but I can take some pictures and send them off to Janet too and get a few close-ups to you. That white in behind really makes that kind of pop, and it blends in with this piece so beautifully. So there's another companion piece for that. What a mess I've made in my living room. Okay. Now, another technique that I think is very popular this time of year, and we see it usually with wheat, and we see it with, this happens to be millet from the Knut Nielsen company. I love this technique of bunching. And so this happens to be dry material, and you've seen this before, but now we know what it is, and it's bunching. So here I have the bunches. I put them together with the Coe picks. They have the wire on them, always two. I'm always using two because I like to be able to pop them in like that, and then I'm gonna swivel. If you put one in, even though the Coe pick is square, it may swivel. Janet, did I have some questions? I can't read them if they're low. You could tell me if I did.
You do have a question. Yeah, a question just popped in. Did you pick down the wire on top of the roses, or is it just sitting on top? And I think it's just sitting on top on the one you did pave and the white box.
The pave and the, yeah, so there's foam in there, and then they're all cut to, maybe like 2.5 inches to go down into the foam.
But the wire on top. The wire on top, though, did you pick that, or is that just sitting on top?
I tangled it. I tangled it into the side of the rose, and so that it wasn't going to go anywhere. So let me pull that guy out. So this one. Yeah. So what I do is I kind of tangle it around the leaf. I tangle it and tuck it in like that, and it's not going to go anywhere. If you take a little bit more time than I am, because I'm trying to expedite this and not take up too much more time than the half an hour that's given. See how I'm doing this? I'm just wrapping it around what's there. You could take some wire and make a hairpin and then pop it right down, and that would secure it in there too. But I find just by wrapping it around what's already there is already fast. And it's kind of tangled up and it's staying there. I hope you can see how pretty that is. Isn't that yummy? Yeah, sometimes I string beads into the wire too, because I love doing that kind of stuff, because I come from the world of crafting. And so I just love to use some of the supplies that I have in my little she shed. And so beads would be beautiful in that too, don't you think? Yeah. Thank you, Janet. Okay, so now back to this one, which I think is so wonderful for this time of year. Now, I've been involved with FTD since 1984. And when I started, anybody out there of the same vintage as you'll remember a really wonderful little arrangement that we used to do called the Tickler. And so when Knut Nielsen had these little bunny tails, I had to have them because it just reminded me, it was really reminiscent of what we used to do with that little, was one of the first codified things I think FTD had, was the Tickler base. And so here's that technique again of taking the stick and, the bunching and keeping them together just in one technique with these Coe picks. I know they're not Coe anymore because Coe isn't in business any longer, but we can still get these wired picks. I just happen to call them Coe still. So here in this arrangement, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 different bundles all going crisscross across. And this is the time of year for this particular technique. Why? Because it reminds us of harvest, right? So if we think about what's going on outside and they're bundling up all the hay and the food items. And so that's wonderful for this time of year, don't you think? So these are some succulents. They were both had one side that was maybe kind of a little less foliage on that. So it was really important then when I pushed them together that they became this one great big thing. I could have used cabbage here, but I think with the popularity with succulents, and I happened to have them and they were just the right size for this particular arrangement. So there I put them down in, and here I used a Coe pick for this too. A lot of times we just glue a wire in and pop it down in and it's going to spin in there. Anytime I can use something square that's wood, that's going to go down into the foam and swell up, the wood's going to swell up and it's going to hold that nice and tight. That's probably been in there maybe an hour now, and those are snug. They're not going anywhere. And if I had only put wires on them, who knows? I just had an arrangement delivered to me with the succulent wired that way, and it fell right out. And so that's my choice is always wood and square wood. And that way, big, heavy things like that are going to stay. So that is probably not a technique. It's more of a mechanic, right? Because it's not seen by the client. It's how we're putting this in to adhere it to make sure that it stays. So that's when we have what we call good mechanics.
And is that a live succulent? Or
Yeah.
you said that's 2 pieces?
Yeah, they are. I've been away for about 3 weeks and these were in a pot that blew over. And so I just rerouted them into another pot. And while I was gone in 3 weeks, they had already had fresh little roots on them. And so you just can't go wrong with these succulents. And so here in northern New England, you got to bring this particular one in. Here we can keep outside all year the one that's the chickens and hens, but anything that's this type of a succulent like Echeveria, they're not going to do well with they're not going to play nice in our winter weather here in northern New England. So still grouping. So you can see how the sheets just play out so beautifully and all this wonderful line. I love it already. And then what I'm going to do, I was going to do this all in dried material, but I wanted to be able to use the succulents. They'll actually root down in that foam too. So I have this, again, the celosia. This is called the brain celosia, which I absolutely adore because I think customers are loving texture lately. I'm noticing that the more we load in the interesting patterns that nature provides, the more the customers are going to just love that. And so here I'm going to stay with my groupings. I'm going to add a little bit of pink. So pink isn't necessarily known as a fall color, but where it's muted like this, so we're adding gray to that pink, I think it's really going to work well for me. So there's the celosia. Then, I don't know, I really just had these flowers left over from the other, and I wanted to be able to do this. So I can continue grouping, or I can maybe go tall. If we were all here and I could hear y'all, you'd be saying, no, go tall, oh no, go vertical. But I'm thinking vertical. So I'm going to keep going in my vertical line with this yummy kangaroo paw. Still grouping. I've never been one where I'm going to design things that are evenly distributed through the design. Why? Because my competition did that. And so as a businesswoman, I make choices even within design to make sure that I'm standing out. And the way to do that is observe your competition, find out what they have for design styles, and then find something else that works for you. And so that's what I'm doing with this. This wonderful Veronica. One of my favorite flowers is Veronica. I'm going to keep the grouping. I could put the stems on the other end coming out so it would look like the Veronica was bunched too. But here I'm going to put the Veronica in the front, blending that blue right into that succulent, because the succulent I chose because it was that gray blue. And I knew that the Veronica, being a nice muted violet blue, would go into that just perfectly. This is more polychromatic. What I mean by polychromatic is many colors, because I have pink into red. So then I have the blue into the blue green. You can't discount the color of this green because it is important in this design, isn't it? I'm gonna let that sheath go right through like that, creating a nice lovely line just like that. And then I have a little bit of hypericum to make sure that this red continues to tell a nice story. Pink, burgundy, and into red. Just like that leaf that I showed you. You know how the colors just bled into that? That's my permission to do this exact same thing. I'm one to pay attention to nature and then use that knowledge of the plant material that you love in your design work. Makes sense to me. And then I also have a few of these wonderful pheasant feathers. I have found one, but I have another one somewhere. I don't know where, but I'll look for it. The eucalyptus. I'm going to go long on this side. I'll put it up on the mantle after so we can see it, how it looks up there on the mantle. There we go. Nice grouping of that. See how easy it is when you determine to make a certain style of design? It's really going to work great. I have a little bit more eucalyptus. Love the smell of it. I'm going to have that come out here on this side, in a different plane than the grouping on the other side. I'm just loving this. I hope it looks good from the front. Let me see. It's hard to design from the back. All right, now I know what I want to do over here. I have a few more of the brown leaves from the magnolia, which I adore. I love brown. I don't know about you, but I'm over gray. So I'm happy to have brown back in my life. I'm a brown. There's a nice little clump of brown leaves, letting that fall just below it. Remember that layering look? There it is, just all in one little cluster, just like that. Then I have something else in the red tone. Found my other feather, which is pomegranates. So here's my color story of red. Red, add white, get a little pink, add black, get a little burgundy, add black and gray. That's a wonderful color to finish telling my color story. I'm going to group these right here. I was really looking for some fresh pomegranates. They're just not available here just yet, but soon they will be because it's part of what we always expect in the fall. Here's my feathers. They got a little wet. And I'm going to put my wet feathers, use them anyway because I love them, and group them right here. So within this arrangement, for our techniques, we have our bunching, we have grouping, and let's see how that looks. I'll take my bottle arrangement down, and we'll put this one right up here and see how she looks. I think she's just beautiful and fabulous. These containers are great for narrow places like that. And so let's see. There's so much more I'd like to share with you. So some of the techniques that I didn't do that if I had time, I would have. So one of them is my favorite, is armature and kubari. And so those are holding mechanics. It's a mechanic, but it's also decorative. And so kubari is when we use some bent branches within a container, and we use that as our holding medium. Sometimes you can still see the bent branches, and sometimes it's a mechanic that just goes away. Sometimes it's very deliberate. Armatures are just things that you can make out of almost anything that then becomes your holding medium. And so I just knew that I would go long because I always have so much to say. And so I know we covered a lot of techniques, and I hope you enjoyed our program featuring the wow factor with techniques. Any other questions, Janet?
That was awesome, Ann. Thank you.
Great.
I'm
Thanks.
just always amazed at your talent and creativity.
Thanks.
So yes, we are open for any final questions. If anybody has any questions, just pop them in the chat box and we will ask Ann. While we give anybody a chance to ask any final questions, do you have one final little tip you can share with us, Ann?
Yeah, I'd love to. You're welcome. You're welcome. My tip is just to keep learning and to invest in yourself. You did this afternoon with me, and know that you can go to FTD University, and all these programs that Janet puts out for us, plus the ones we've been doing for years, are on that FTD University, and you find that at FTDI, right, Janet? Right? I'm not leading anybody astray, right? So my tip is to always keep learning. And then once you learn, mentor somebody, coach somebody, teach somebody just exactly what you do. Nothing I did today seemed hard to you, did it? And probably there are things that maybe you're doing already, but you didn't know the name of them or where they fell in the realm of, are they an element design, a principle of design? Are they a mechanic, or are they a technique? So with that, you really need to invest not only in yourself, you need to invest into your reading material. One of my favorites is the book from AIFD. This is soon going to be a new release too. I think sometime soon, I believe by next summer, they're going to release the new one. But this one is well worn. It's been in many suitcases, and this is my go-to. And another one that I use, but it's not in print anymore. If you have it, dig it out. When I'm training a flower arranger, somebody brand new, and they're interning with me, or if they need to learn the basics about design, I loved this book. But since it's not in print anymore, if you have this somewhere in your library, take good care of it, because you're not going to find these anymore. I did find a couple for a friend on a website that had used books. And so if you don't have that one, it's called Design School. That was a good one. This one's the granddaddy of them all, though, and I'm really anxious to see the new one. So my final tip to you is invest in yourself, invest in your career, invest in your professionalism, just like you did with me this afternoon.
All right, thanks, Ann. No other questions. You had so much to share that doesn't look like there's any questions out there. So we just want to thank everyone for attending today. Recording will be available on demand on the FTD Mercury Network Florist YouTube channel. And for more education programming from FTD, visit ftdi.com to register for upcoming free webinars and design shows, as well as viewing other past education programs on demand. So thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.